And here we go.
Here we go. I think this is the one we want. Okay, so we're live.
We're live.
You want to do the intro?
Go right ahead.
You do the intro?
Okay. Hi, we're here to introduce Dani Batsheva.
There you go, Batsheva.
She's done several book covers for us, starting with Marionette and then moving on to Merciless Waters, Scissor Sisters, and Lies That Bind.
City of Snares.
City of Snares, right?
City of Snares. That's right. That too.
Yeah.
So fantastic art. We love the covers, and
right.
You know, we're glad.
Dani's really easy to work with. She's very professional. Very professional.
Thank
so
you. Well, I just want to make the process fun for everyone because it's fun for me, and I want other people to kind of share in that joy.
I think you do a good job of doing that. So I do. So guys, we have a little construction going on behind us, so just ignore it. Pretend like it's not happening.
Yeah, our house is getting painted right now, but pay it no mind.
Right. So, but yeah, so we're Heather and Steve from Escape Press. Woohoo! So let's dive right in, Dani. Let's get started. So tell us a little bit about you. Why art? Why book covers?
Oh boy. I mean, it's such a loaded question at this point where, I don't know, when somebody's like, tell me about yourself, I'm like, how much do you want to know?
You're a pigeon. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, I think that with book covers, there's more of a magical element to it. I think that it's still a little bit naive. I think it's still a medium where you can kind of, it's more acceptable to do drawings for it, whereas I feel like a lot of other areas are very refined, very clean. They expect a certain kind of standard of finish, whereas you can just kind of feel it out with books. I like books. I like the idea of people getting away from a screen, getting away from that blue backlight, and just imagining a story. I think we're losing in a lot of areas the ability to imagine, and books are great for that. But yeah, why books? That's why books for the most part. I also feel like books are really, really cool because they really are a piece of history. And it's not just the actual book, when it was written, the kind of language used, but it's also a personal piece where somebody could have received a book as a gift and the note is in there. I got a book from a pub once and it was from the 1930s and nobody was reading it. So they're like, just take it off the shelf and don't tell anyone. And I found little notes in it, like the person's favorite passage. I found some details about it, some research, like little bits and bobs here and there. And I found a 70 or 80, 90-year-old noodle smashed in there. And I'm like, you know what? I love that.
Okay.
Excellent. I do too. I'm a huge book notator. This makes me a little cringy, but I break spines. I write in the books. I highlight the books. I put tabs in the books. And I come from a long line of it. Like I inherited, my great-grandfather kept some of his books from college. And so, but he wrote in them in underlined passages. And it's like, you know, the history of economics. It's not a super sexy title, but it was interesting because it gave me insight to the things that he was highlighting to remember, you know, either because he was struggling with the concept or he thought it was really interesting. And then my other grandfather on my maternal side went to college, and he was a huge reader, and he kept all of the books he read, I assume for an English class, but he kept all his Shakespeare books. And so he has gone through and underlined and written all over the books. And it's so fun to have a copy of Macbeth that I can open and see what really struck my grandfather as he was reading it. I mean, there's something magical, I think, about it.
Yeah, so there is, and it's cool. Once in a while, you'll get something from a used bookstore, and it's the same kind of way. Somebody will have notes in there that really struck them about the book, and it's cool. So just seeing what other people thought, I mean, it gives you that insight.
Yeah, and I think there's an element to it that's also very personal because this is kind of like a secret note being passed to you from someone else,
Yeah.
and nobody else
Mhm.
can see it. Nobody even knows that this exists, and this is like,
Right.
wow, this is cool. Like I can kind of get into the head of the person that was reading this book, and
Yeah.
I don't think I find many opportunities to do that outside of physical media.
Right. I agree. It's kind of like inheriting somebody else's garden. You know,
Yeah.
you get to see, you learn a little bit about them by learning the things that they planted and, you know,
And
really,
how-
right,
how
how
it
they brought
set
it to
up.
life and cared for it. So we inherited quite a garden in our house when we moved in. So I'm just delighted. I wish I knew which one of them was a gardener, and maybe it was both of them, but it was an older married couple who had lived here. They built the house back in
Ooh.
1970. But the garden is amazing. I was just looking at the garden. The garden is amazing, and we just learned that we have daffodils and perhaps tulips and crocuses coming. I can't really identify the other early shoots we have, but I recognize the daffodil ones. So we're gonna have quite a show in about a month. I'm
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
I'm pretty
It's gonna be
excited.
amazing.
But inheriting a book from someone is like the same way, or picking up a used book or finding a book, I think is the same way when you read somebody else's notations. And I often wonder, um, like my grandfather hated Hamlet, and it's all over the book. Like he's underlined passages, and in one of them he wrote nitwit out on the edge. And so, but he loved Macbeth, and it makes me wonder sometimes if that's where my love of Macbeth came from. Is I wonder if it was one of our Texas trips.
Yeah.
But it's so funny because it does give you some insight into what they liked and what they didn't like,
Yeah.
and what struck them. And I just think
Yeah.
that's, but I think inheriting art is the same way.
Yeah.
When you inherit art from somebody or you're
Yeah.
gifted art from somebody, I think it says something about them,
Yeah.
why they've thought of you particularly with that
Very
piece.
much so, because I mean, the art that someone has kept and put up in their bedroom or their living room or
Mhm.
whatever, does say a lot about them, what their interests are,
Mhm.
down to the lighting and everything.
Right. I think art plays such an important role. You guys can see a little of our background here, but if we had our camera turned the other way, you'd see that there's not really much spare wall room in this
Not at
room.
all.
I'm a maximalist too. I completely understand.
Yeah, and we fill all of our spaces with some kind of art, whether it's sculpture or
Carvings or paintings.
right,
or whatever,
paintings.
so.
And I'm a huge I'm a huge fan of art because I think it tells us a lot, not only about the maker but the person who buys it. And
Yeah.
so, and I think that's one of the things about book covers. I know I personally have purchased a book without even reading the back,
Yep.
just
Cover was
based on
just
the
perfect.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like
That's
there
how I
was
pick
something about
wine.
yeah. I mean, there's some there's sometimes there's sometimes when I'm at the bookstore and it's you will be like, what's it about? And I was like, oh no, didn't even look. But look at this cover. So okay,
Well, we
so
got a question from Kimmy Ann there. What cover did,
Kimmy! That's my
so I'll
friend.
let you go with that question.
yeah, which one did you enjoy illustrating the most, and which did you draw the most inspiration from?
I would say up to date, I would say Scissor Sisters. I
Mm.
would you know what? The whole book cover thing is actually fairly new to me. I started with Dead
Mhm.
Inside, which was in 2020, and
Okay.
that was literally when I started doing book covers. I did not have an expectation that I would go into publishing. I was always kind of told that's for people that do stuff that's like New York Times, political cartoon, or
Mm.
children's book, and people were very they were not very receptive to my suggestions for what I'd like to do with books.
Mhm.
And so getting the opportunity to start doing book covers was totally out of the blue and ended up, you know, I ended up shifting gears and being like, I actually really enjoy this. So I'm very early in as far as my history doing book covers goes. So yeah, it was like I've done a lot of stuff with, well, it was Death's Head Press, and now I think it's Dead Sky Publishing. Um, I started off with them, and then it went over to Marionette, and now I've gone over to Clash Books. I'm working with
Awesome.
Charles Platt on a fully illustrated book right now, all about cats.
Oh,
Um,
how fun.
yeah, and I loved Scissor Sisters though, because oh my gosh, sapphic villains, how could you not?
Yeah.
And I loved that there was so much to work with. I mean, when you're dealing with an anthology, I actually find it easier to illustrate a cover because I am a maximalist. Like I said earlier,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
love jamming a composition. I can't help it. I just want to. Um, because personally what I enjoy seeing is just a lot of complicated little details that I can pick apart. Little
Yeah.
Easter eggs that I can share, small things that could really tell a story. And I mean,
Mhm.
I loved working on that because I could create a sort of drawn collage, and I could explore working with different line works and, different textures and colors and everything. Um, but I did have to stop myself at a certain point, because if you gave me like 3 months to do that cover,
Yeah.
it would have been crazy. Like, I would have just
Yeah.
made it crazy. And I think like that's the most challenging part, stopping.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that would be one of the challenges as an artist, is knowing when to stop. Like, when is it done? When do you think it's done?
Well,
Well,
it for me, I do have a point of finish that I aim for, but that's something that I developed over the years where I'm like, I feel comfortable with this. This is presentable. This is done. But it's
Mhm.
only after getting to know my process over the course
Mhm.
of like literally decades now where I'm like, "Oh, okay, here we go." So, yeah. Yeah. It's
Yes.
it's good. I love it.
Yeah. So the next question is, does this medium allow for more creative freedom?
Which medium? Meaning book covers
I
or
think so. I don't know for
okay,
sure, but it's a
okay,
question from the audience. So,
okay.
yeah.
So I would say there are actually a lot more restrictions with book covers. There are
Mhm.
a ton of
Yes.
restrictions because you have to put this on the shelf, and it doesn't matter if it's adult or not. It has to be like family friendly. So,
Mhm.
that's the thing, is when you're dealing with something like Lies That Bind, where it gets pretty intense and you have to
Yeah.
put a disclaimer and a content warning on it. Um,
Right.
you're walking a really fine line of how to communicate the contents of the book, and
Right.
you have to also be aware that it's like there are certain stores that are going to want to slap like a censorship sticker over it if
Right.
you're if they see it as being like out of line or something.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I do kind of love the idea of creating something that's like a cult book cover, because there's so many album covers where they're
Yeah.
censored, and
Yes.
you have to like go to a special retailer to get the uncensored album cover.
Mhm. 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 That's true. And I remember that being a big deal when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s. Like, when we would go down to Peaches, there were albums we would have to go down to Westport to get
Mm.
because of the
Yeah.
rules in, I don't know, sales and marketing or something here
Right.
in Johnson County versus Jackson County.
Right?
So
And
wild.
I'm still
Wild.
kicking myself for not being able to get my hands on the album covers that I wanted, that were deemed to
Right.
be too like sexual or violent for
Right.
my
Too much of
local record
something.
store.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild, really. Censorship is one of those wild things. And
Yeah.
we could have a very long conversation
Oh
about
yeah.
censorship, but because it makes my skin crawl. But
Mine too.
yeah. So, well, let's spend a little bit of time talking about um, AI. Uh-huh, I did
Oh
it.
boy.
AI.
Are we
Yeah.
are we gonna do this?
We're gonna do it.
We'll do it.
We're gonna talk about another hot topic. We're gonna switch from censorship to um, robots. Robots
Okay. Now,
creating art.
for the people that are watching that do know me, I I live in the 1880s. I am not a part of this planet. I'm not a part of this world. All right. I'm gonna do my best to not drop any F-bombs because like you just set
Mhm.
something off. But
I understand.
but so let's just get this out of the way.
Mhm.
AI is plagiarism software. There's no
Mhm.
ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're creating
Yeah.
an amalgamation of work and time and effort that is taken directly from artists that have already created visuals, their
Mhm.
own artwork, their own illustration. So that for me, like I'm laying the groundwork there. I hear people talk about like, oh, well, technically artists do the same thing because they're taking ideas from other artists. No, it's not the same thing.
No,
Inspiration is
inspiration
not
isn't
the
the
same
same thing.
thing. You still have
Yeah.
to learn how to draw it. You still have to put in the work. You are
Right.
not taking food away from another artist by doing it unless you're straight up, plagiarizing their work, which is illegal. So I don't
Mhm.
understand how we don't have regulations for this. Um,
Mhm.
but
Right.
that's
And
that's that.
I think it's gonna take an amazingly long amount of time
Yeah.
Right.
to really get some reasonable AI legislation. And I know that there are groups working on it,
Yeah.
but AI is developing so quickly. Like by the time you get legislation in front of a legislator, you have to update it all over again. And so I think one of the challenges they face is trying to use language that's specific enough, but also broad enough to
Right.
allow for the directions that AI goes into.
And I think that's the thing that a lot of people that seem to be pro AI just don't seem to get is that if I'm talking about images, if I take someone's head and put it on a different person's body and then smooth it out so it looks good, I'm not creating anything. I'm not generating anything new. I'm cutting and pasting. That's really all I'm doing.
Honestly,
Kindergarten.
you could actually argue that you are doing something. There are people that do photo retouching in Hollywood
Right.
or in
Sure.
the industry, I want to say, and it's like that's actually hard work. I've done that. I've
Yeah.
done
Right.
photo retouching for like models, magazines, products, and that
Right.
does take a degree of work.
A
But
skill. It takes a degree of skill, I think.
yes,
And I think that's the difference is, a software program, I'm going to call them the robots because I have a thing about
I've been
robots.
calling them the robots, girl. Let's do
Right.
this.
I mean, listen, I'm 50 years old and I grew up reading Isaac Asimov. So you can
Mm,
call them anything you want to, but they are the robots.
yeah,
And so the only way they can learn is by programming and then mimicry. And so, like, you have to start with a base software and base commands, and then you have to write in the commands that teach it to mimic and adapt certain things. But there's nothing original that goes
Right.
into it outside of the software writer who wrote the software.
Right.
Like that's the most original piece of the robot.
yeah,
Everything else, it has to be taught. And so no matter what you're teaching it, it's like teaching a parrot just to mimic
Right.
yeah.
words that they
It's
don't
patterns.
necessarily have
Yeah, exactly.
understanding of. Though I don't know if I believe that now that I said that out loud. Parrots may understand what they say. I don't know. But
Who
I mean,
knows?
right. But
yeah, it picks up on patterns and it's basically, like I said, it's an amalgamation. So like
right.
it'll scrape images, portfolios and everything and create, you know, new images based on that. But the thing about it is that okay, maybe it'll be refined, maybe it'll be good, all right? But right now from what I'm seeing, first of all, it's cheap. It's cheap. It's
Mhm.
cheap looking. You can tell what's AI and what isn't. Um,
Mhm.
and it's kind of creating a feedback loop because I think that it's been unleashed in a way where there isn't something in the software that's kind of tethering it. It's just consuming and then it
Mhm.
starts consuming its own products and creates this feedback loop where you get like steadily more and more. I was going to drop an F bomb, but you get more mutated
Right.
versions of
Right.
these images. And the thing is that because it's untethered in such a way, um, what I've noticed, I looked up Arthur Rackham's work the other day because I wanted to find something specific that he'd done because I was using him for
Mhm.
reference. And I found so many AI results for Arthur Ashe. And it was really disturbing because I could see like bulging eyeballs and like I was like, this is not.
Yeah,
I'm
because
not
the
using Google
software,
anymore.
yeah, the software isn't designed to make differential patterns among certain things. And so like it's like I have this horrible nightmare about robots. I mean, I blame my parents, you know, but they're just feeding themselves. And robots don't have discernment.
No.
Like they are not, you know, you can't, it's just a software program.
It's artificial.
Right. And a software program can only do what it's programmed to do. And you can't program, at least yet, discernment in detail. So you leave a certain amount to, and listen, I'm not saying there's no room in society for AI at all. I think it could definitely help in fields of data and like big data. Like
I agree. I actually agree. I think we could use it in the medical industry.
Right. But maybe perhaps not in art.
Well,
and
here's
maybe
the thing.
not.
This also kind of ties in loosely to what you were bringing up about the legislation regarding AI.
Right.
In order for us to push this forward and have protection for artists, we need to have a society that values art and the humanities.
I agree. And I think this is one of the problems in the United States, especially.
In the States, I feel like they currently don't value art. I feel like when I tell people that I'm an illustrator here, the response I generally get is like, oh, good luck with that. Okay.
Yeah.
But when I say it in another country, there's a degree of respect. You're a cultural ambassador, so to speak. You provide, you know, you feed the culture, you're growing it, and you're creating things that people value.
That's a good point.
And I think one of the reasons why is, you know, not North America, but the United States itself is such a young country, and we were not the wait, hold on, I'm going to get there.
Okay.
I just need a minute.
Sure.
But I'm going to say political system, but I don't necessarily mean that. But like the white settler culture that's in place now didn't go through the Renaissance in this geographical period, in this geographical location. And so, and people really hate it when I say this, but I was a history major. We live in a country that was founded by religious zealots literally no other country in Europe could tolerate.
Literally, Puritans came here because nobody else wanted them.
So did the Pilgrims.
Yeah.
Right. The Pilgrims, there was a real low tolerance for the Pilgrims as well. And so, and you know, Jamestown was founded by second and third sons that had no prospects back in the country of origin. They came here to take chances and find gold. I mean, that was the whole point of Jamestown. Is it was supposed to be a gold colony. It just failed as a gold colony. But it's, I mean, like, and because we historically killed all the people who were already living here, we can't even like use an assimilated Renaissance period. It's just like there's none. So like there's none. There's no respect for any kind of what we would consider cultural arts, whether it's fiber arts or, you know, 3D mediums or 2D mediums or writing or I mean, like there's.
And I do find that really sad because pretty much every other, you know, developed country has a branch of the government that is there to protect artists.
Right. Throw a dart at a world map, and it's shocking to me that there are countries that are well known for censorship laws for artists. Even they support artists more than we do as a quote unquote real job. You know what I mean? As something to be honored. Like listen, there are countries that have very strict cross the line and you're going to go to jail forever, you know, censorship regulations. But being a writer or being an artist is still a real job, and it's a respected job.
You know, and
And
I
Well,
think,
there's a
they
whole
understand how
cultural
hard you have to
background.
work to get it.
Well, and they understand that you don't really have a culture without it.
No.
And I feel like that's something
yeah,
the United States still kind of struggles with. And what's important to me is that you can go to other countries in South America that had the same history as us. Like they went in, they killed everybody who was already living there, they established whatever their European settler mimic
right.
colony situation was, but ad- they adapted like more of the arts.
Yeah.
Like you can go to, where's the country I'm thinking about, Uruguay, and like there's whole, you know cultural arts is part of the thing that's protected,
Yeah.
and it's part of the thing, and I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
what is
Well,
what is happening?
and I think one of the big problems, at least here in America too, is this, I don't know what you call it, like a fast food consumer based
Yes.
mentality. We want something right now. It's like, why,
Yeah.
why did, and this is not my opinion, I'm just saying what I think I
Right.
see out there. Why do I want to spend $500 on a nice piece of art when I can spend $10 on an AI thing and get all of them for free?
Yeah, I do
And it's
think
like,
there's a consumerism
it's like,
here.
get a
I
bubble.
mean,
It's
there's
That
like
like,
a greed thing. We've become kind of accustomed to um
Right.
the convenience of it, something that is so
yeah,
immediate that we don't understand what we're actually missing out on. We don't have a Sistine Chapel. When you think of the
No.
United States in terms of the arts,
Yeah.
I don't really know what we have. People think of
Right.
Hollywood, people think of movies.
Right. Right.
And
right.
that's not to say that there isn't a lot of heart in film and in the
Right.
industry.
Right.
There definitely is, but the only reason there's a degree of respect towards it is because it can rake in millions of dollars.
Well, that's it, right? Because it goes back to the consumerism and
Yeah,
capitalism, which is, I mean, I tell people all the time, we're we're founded by Puritans and capitalists before anybody knew what a capitalist really was. So I don't know really what we expect. I mean, like when people are like, "What's your guiding principles as a country?" Well, that's it.
how
Yeah,
much can you get for
money.
a dollar?
How much can you get for your dollar? And also, God hates you.
Right.
So, I don't know where you go from there. But another question we have is, how do you feel about professional competitions that accept AI submissions?
Well, um,
Right.
well, I did something a little bit sneaky about this. And I'm not going to name names, but
Okay.
there was a whole thing because I'm an illustrator. I sit firmly in the field of illustration, and that doesn't necessarily mean comics, though I can dabble. There is crossover, but I find that like I'm very much a traditional illustrator that so I can only speak for that. I can't speak for fine arts or anything beyond. But within the illustration competitions internationally, there was a big wave happening where the former president of the Society of Illustrators was basically approaching all of these different organizations and competitions and was requesting that they add a clause to their contracts or their rules saying that they will not accept AI art. And there was one competition that was just not budging. And that happened to be one that I got quite a few awards from. And so I basically said, I'm not going to accept any of these awards if
Oh,
you don't
wow.
add this clause.
Uh-huh.
And then, I reached out to the president and I was like, this is your opportunity. I just said I'm not going to accept my awards. So, I think if you're going to try and get this done, you got to strike when the iron's hot. And so that
Mhm.
was the final one that we were just kind of like, they agreed in the end, like no AI. So I
Right.
feel really good about that. Um, so that is, that is good where, okay, there are people that are valuing human artists, not just people that are typing
Mhm.
in prompts. But the one other thing I'm finding is, how like when there's a trend where it's
Mhm.
back when I was a kid, it was Tamagotchi. I'm aging myself. Pokemon
Right.
cards. Right now, it's the Stanley
Yeah.
Cups. And it goes so hard because it's convenient. It's the cool new thing. We're, enamored with this new technology or gadget or whatever. And then
Mhm.
it just drops. And people are like,
Right.
this is trash. I'm over it.
Right.
There's
Right.
something regarding AI that's happening where I'm finding artists are even going back to pencils. Artists are
Right.
starting to be like, I'm going to ditch the computer altogether and just go
Mhm.
straight to traditional works. And then I'm
Mhm.
finding that people are, publishing companies and artists and everything are actually hiring artists because
Mhm.
they want a hand-drawn piece so that they can
Right.
now say, this is a status symbol. I'm not using
Right.
AI. I don't need to use AI. I
Yeah.
can afford an artist. And so I'm
Right.
seeing some gear shifting here. Um,
Mhm.
which is why I don't I, everybody's telling me I should worry about AI. I'm actually not. The only thing I'm
Right.
worried about is that it's taking my friends and my own scraping my own portfolio to put
Right.
into a machine to regurgitate. But
Right.
and I think that we should be getting paid for that. That's all. Um,
Right.
but as far as actually harming illustration as a whole, I don't actually think it's going to do any long-term damage because why do people like illustrators? Why do people have favorite authors? Because there's a
Right.
person behind it. There's a person they
Right.
can relate to. Wow, this came out of somebody's brain. That's so cool. Whereas,
Right.
I mean, it's just such a vibe killer when it's like, oh, a program did it. Okay.
Yeah.
Meh,
Yeah.
Right.
meh.
Yeah.
And there's a certain style there too. There's a vibe or a feel to different
Right.
artists. It's like, oh, I really love this particular one because
Right.
Yeah, and
you know
I feel like
yeah.
exactly. It's also like a stylistic preference. And with AI, everything is kind of smoothed out into what I guess the program would consider to be like perfect looking. But for me, actually, I'm not attracted to that. Now, maybe
Mhm.
unpopular opinion, but there are certain things that kind of get my brain going where I get really excited, and certain things that don't. So I can look at a painting and just say objectively, that is incredible. I love it. Technically magnificent, great concept, but it might not do anything for me. And so
Right.
I
Right.
will see a very painterly piece that is obviously gorgeous, but actually the painterly quality doesn't do much for me. But if I look at
Mhm.
Harry Clark, if I look at Aubrey Beardsley, I'm like, oh my God, the black and white lines are amazing. And that's what gets
Mhm.
me more so than
Right.
anything like, you could show me Michelangelo and it's like, oh, wow, great. Wow, amazing. Impressed, legend. But
Right.
show me a really
Right.
nice clean line and a simple design, super graphic on a white surface, and I'm like, "Yes!" More so
Mhm.
than anything else. So I think, with AI, it becomes so one note that I do think people are going to start gravitating more towards human art, well, humans again, actual artists,
Right.
because there's a difference there in the way our brains function and the way we process and communicate information.
Right. I agree. I mean, like, I think that, and listen, I have to get all of my computer information from our son. I mean, like, I don't
Yeah,
know that I necessarily understand all the things about scraping, but he assures me that's the problem.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so,
He shakes his head at us all the time
right,
too about
but
different
right,
things with tech. He's like,
yeah,
let me do it. Move out the way.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but so I think here's the problem is if you're going to use, and I think the problem may be in how the word plagiarism is being used legally in AI. Because if you're going to use data that you have learned from an artist or a writer to program, then someone should be getting a residual check for that.
Yeah,
Like
Yeah.
that, somebody should be getting a royalty
exactly.
check. Like if you are using somebody's product
And there should
to
be a signed
program,
agreement in place too that
and
Yeah.
giving the rights to do that.
yeah, like listen, we can't name names, and it was a big bahaha, but we had an artist that got tangled up with AI, and she is still in the middle of several legal things about it because a ton of her work got scraped, and then
Oh, yeah.
all of her work started popping as AI when you put it through the AI filters,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah,
anyway, it was a tangled up mess. And I mean, like, I think the thing that's harmful about it, besides because it's kind of like I can feel the hate mail already, but
all
it's
right, all
kind
right.
of trash art. But like you but the thing is I think that as a group, as humans, things go through, like you said, things go through their phase, and then we're
Right.
kind of like over it,
Yeah.
and then we go back to a different phase. And so I think for the longevity of it, may not be as long lived as people fear, because,
Right.
listen, I'll get an email over one typo in a book. In a 400-page book, there could be one typo, and I can get a lovely email that's like, hey, just so you know, page 343, this sentence has got this typo in it. And sometimes they are incredibly hateful
Yeah.
about having bought a book that has a typo in it. And I just think, but okay, because these are the people who are not going to buy AI books on purpose. Like, they're going to be the ones who are going to lead the charge, and like, this is trash.
Yeah.
There are 82 sentences in this book that make no sense at all. There's no verb. Like, there's going to be a backlash from it.
Right.
Not just from the authors and artists. There's going to be a backlash from readers
Yeah.
and people who purchase art, who are going to be like, hey, I hung this up and have noticed this dog has 6 eyeballs, not 2.
Right.
I didn't notice it in the store. I was really caught up in the light and the lines and the color, but I've looked at it now for 18 hours, and it occurs to me these are eyeballs.
Yeah.
Or as I hear people say, 7 fingers on the
Right.
hand.
Like, I think that there will be some consumer backlash in the arts, at least, that I don't think it'll slow down AI at all.
No,
but,
it won't. I mean, the
but
genie's out of the bottle. It exists.
Right. But I think it'll make people be more careful or cautious about their purchase. Like, they're going to Google to see if it's really an author or really an artist, before they spend their money.
Scary. That is scary, though, because there are no rules right now that say that people have to state whether something is AI or not.
No rules at all. No rules at all. And I think that's one of the things that's changing. I think this is I don't know about traditional presses, but a lot of the indie publishers we've talked to have been adding AI clauses to their contracts.
Oh, yeah. We're seeing a big surge in that. So,
and it's funny because
we've got it in ours because of what we've seen from other presses.
And we, had quite a snafu. But listen, you live and learn. Yeah. But we know, like, when we were going about the clauses, we asked a couple other indie presses, like, hey, what does yours say? And then we sent 3 versions to our lawyer. He was like, hey, great. In the state of Kansas, there's nothing that legally backs this up. Just FYI.
Wow.
Like, there's no, like, we can have it on our contract that you can't have it in there, and that it has to be disclosed and all this other stuff. But in fact, since there's no law about it, the best we can get is, what did he say? Breach of contract due to failure to disclose, but not for actual use. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, so is this a state by state thing? And he's like, right now it's a nothing thing. Like, nobody's got it. All you can get them on is basically breach of contract because they didn't disclose, they weren't honest. But there's nothing further than that. And that's, listen, I think this is probably true everywhere, not just in the United States, but we move faster than the law. And so it takes a long time for legislature to catch up with us.
You could argue that with everything.
So, okay, what did you want to say?
We've got
Another question?
From Kimmy.
Okay.
And then I'd like to change the topic a little bit if we could.
But taken from your illustrations. Oh gosh, I'd hate to even think about that. Oh, don't Google it. Don't try to find out. I feel like that would just be a sleepless month. How often do you come across IA pieces that are taken from your illustrations? Oh gosh, that makes me sick.
Honestly, none. My illustrations are actually really difficult for AI to replicate because AI can't do line work. AI can't do
Mm,
letters, AI can't do
mhm,
clean line. I mean, it can, but only if it's filtering a face to make like an anime face, let's say. That is the only
mhm.
time I've seen AI do clear, concise line work. My
Interesting.
style is not replicable in AI, which is
Okay.
pretty cool. And
Yeah.
also, it's still an amalgamation of a bunch of different things. So you're never going to find an exact replica of somebody's works, but you're going to find things that are very, very suggestive
Mhm.
towards clearly
Right.
copying a certain artist. But
Yeah.
the stuff that I do is not the stuff that AI can do, actually.
Well,
Yeah, that's
that's good
good.
news.
Yeah,
Good
that's good
Yeah,
news.
news, but don't Google it anyway, just in case.
yeah,
Um,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. So I'm always so surprised when one of our books shows up on a piracy website, and this is something that is it's very difficult to stop.
Yeah.
Um, and we had, I think, 2 or 3 books show up on a website that was training AI how to write. And luckily, there were some other very big named authors, very big named
Yeah.
authors from the traditional 5 who, have lawyers in their office and not just on
And went
retainer.
after him. Yeah.
Yeah, who got it shut down. And I mean,
Good.
listen, I don't know anything about the person, so it could be they got a letter and was like, "Oh dear, okay, my bad." I mean, I don't know, but it was one of those things where I was like, "Okay,
Well,
interesting." So, I mean, our lawyer sends out cease and desist letters. I mean, I feel like kind of as often as I have high tea, which
Yeah,
is alarmingly a lot.
yeah,
And so, but I don't know that you can do anything about it, and so it becomes a thing that keeps you up all night if you do it too often.
right.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
consider it like having a garden. If you plant tomatoes and strawberries, 20% is going to go to wildlife. No matter what you
Oh,
do, no
yeah.
matter what plants you put in, I call it the wildlife tax.
I
And
call
so,
it the squirrel tax.
right, I just try to be like, listen, you know, the world is not full of great people. The world is full of excellent people. And 20% of them are going to make a quick dollar no matter
Yeah.
any way they can. And you can't let the 20% poison your opinion of the 80% and keep you up all night long.
Right.
You can't waste the brain space on that.
Oh,
So,
no, I agree. You have to set for me, it's I have to set very strict
mhm,
boundaries for myself. So things like I don't look at the YouTube comment section, things like I don't
right,
Google it,
right,
like I won't do certain things where it's like it doesn't matter. Stay in your lane, do your thing. Don't let the
right.
other 20% whatever bring you down.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. So I agree.
So,
So, oh, wait, did you have a question?
yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you, Danny. So looking at the medium that you work in now, looking back at your history, what led you to go into that medium as opposed to any other? And have you ever dabbled in other artistic mediums?
Yeah, actually, I started off strictly painting in acrylic. Um,
Mm,
but the thing is, when you start off painting in acrylic and you're competing in an industry that is so commercial and they just want pieces that are really easy and quick to churn out or that will print
mhm,
nicely, um, it kind of pushed me to change to doing more line work because I found that it's easier to vectorize it. And, part of what I do, I do get enjoyment out of seeing my pieces printed. I like seeing
mhm.
my pieces in a context more so than I like
Hmm.
seeing them on a wall. I like seeing them being
Oh,
put to use. I like seeing people carrying them. I like knowing
mhm,
that it went to creating something that somebody might hold very dear. Um,
mhm,
and because the thing is, you could have a piece on a wall and that's wonderful. But uh, I would rather have somebody carry around a compact mirror with my illustration, and it's their beloved thing that they carry in their purse,
mhm,
or a
mhm,
book. It's their favorite
Right.
cover, and it is worn and loved. I prefer that. So coupled with my love of line work, I said, well, you know, I don't necessarily have to stick to acrylic painting. I still get the same satisfaction out of drawing, and I have more control over the pen. So I'm going to switch to pen and ink. And I just steadily kind of made my move towards it entirely several years ago. And I felt like it was just a lot less high stakes. And that's what a lot of people will say, where it's like, oh, this is easier to fix because you're working in white and black. And then when you're delivering an illustration, um, especially when I was really early on, a lot of people just want something that will print easily. They want something that'll
Right.
be, you know, easily manipulated, easily changed. And I was like, okay, well, I'll give them digital color and I'll
Mhm.
stick to the line work, and they won't be, you know, they'll be none the wiser, and I get to keep my original piece, and then I can send off the digital one.
Mhm.
And if they want to change the colors, they have the freedom to do that. And I left it at that. But I ended up enjoying the act of drawing so much
Mhm.
more than painting, not just because it stylistically sets off my brain, where I really just enjoy putting black ink on a white surface, but because I found that when I'm painting, I'm thinking too much about the back and forth, the different textures. Oh my gosh, is this color going to dry out? Oh my gosh, I have to scoop it up and I have to put it in a container and close it and save it for later. There's I felt like a lot of my focus was going to the medium itself rather
Mhm.
than the freedom of, you know, for me to draw however I want, as crazy as I want, without worrying about babying the medium.
Mhm.
I felt like I was
Right.
babying my paint, and I think that that took a lot away from my work personally. So,
That's really interesting
yeah.
because I could see that. If you're painting or working in clay, you have to spend a certain amount of time making sure everything stays wet enough and fresh enough
Mhm.
Yeah.
to use. And you have to store it a very specific way. So there's a lot of setup and takedown to those
Yeah.
mediums, which is very true, because I'm a quilter and now that I have a sewing room in our new house, I don't have to take anything down and put it away. And for 7.5 years, we lived in a space where I did not have a sewing space. And so I quit sewing. I was
Oof.
like, yeah, no, forget it. It's not worth the half hour to set it up just to do
It's
it
not.
for a half and then the half hour to put it away. So,
Yeah. And I don't know if
mhm.
you're like me, but I have a thing where I'm just like, not gonna say that, just like, don't touch my stuff. Don't touch my
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah,
I place my supplies in a particular order so that I know
right,
exactly what I'm going for. I don't have to think about it. I pick it up, and,
right.
you know, when it comes to supplies, I just wanna be able to take it, get up, and go. I just wanna go.
Yes, yes. I'm a piece quilter, and so my biggest thing is if you touch my pieces, they're not in the order I'm looking
Right.
for them in. And so when I have to pick them up and put them away, then I have to make sure that I have them spread back out the way I want them
Right.
when I piece them together. And it is obnoxious
Yeah.
when people come in and move your stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And because I'm not familiar with all the different terms in art and everything, so when you say line work, you're meaning a drawing, right, of some kind?
I mean a drawing, but when I do say line work, I'm specifically referring to a style of drawing that is 2D, super flat, super clean, influenced
Okay.
just entirely made up of clean line and a variation in line weight to communicate perspective.
I see.
oh,
Okay. Okay.
we're learning
Thanks.
stuff. We're learning stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of feelings about it.
Yeah, it's a good day. But here's the thing. I could tell that you like I wouldn't have called it line work. I would have called it pen and pencil
Yeah.
from the sketches you send us,
Yeah.
to choose from. I'm like, okay, she's really put a lot of thought into line placement. And the thing I always appreciate because I don't have the skill is, hey, my concern is if we do it this way, it's going to be too small, too detailed to print well. And I'm like, okay, got it, noted, got it, right. Keep it
Yeah.
bigger, keep it clear, because it is something, unless you're an artist. I mean, and I'm not just going to say this because I know there are book publishers who are artists, but we are not. And
No.
so when somebody sends me something, I'm like, perfect. And we print it and I'm like, wow, not perfect. Someone
Yeah.
do something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you have a couple, it's a learning curve.
Yeah.
It is.
It's one of the things I really appreciate about you when you send back the emails with sketches, because you're like, I think
Yeah.
this one is gonna, my concern with this piece is this, my concern with that request is this, and it helps us make better decisions about the cover. Because everybody wants a cover where somebody's like, oh my gosh, like the one thing we heard about Marionette the most was, I bought the book because of the cover.
Yeah.
I bought the book because of the cover. And then the same thing happened with Merciless Waters.
Oh,
I saw so many book talkers say, you know, with Marionette, I saw a lot of it on IG and
Instagram,
Instagram. I bought the book because of the cover. I bought the book because of the cover. And I saw the same thing on TikTok with Merciless Waters, you know, and my favorite was, and I wish I could give her credit because I can't remember what book talker it was. She goes, a moment of silence for the cover. And, you know, and I was just so because, you know, as a publisher, that's what you want. You want somebody to love either the first page that they pick up and read in the bookstore, or the back, or the cover. And if you're very lucky, both, you know, like that's what you want. You want somebody to pick up the cover. You want somebody to read a piece of it and be like, oh yeah, yep,
got it.
I gotta have this. This is definitely going in the must-have pile. Because like when we go to bookstores, this may be embarrassing to admit. I don't know if it is or not.
No, that's okay. Let's go. Let's break the ice. I'm into it.
Bookstores, we get piles of books, of books, and then we have to don't do that. Your pile is just as big as mine, sir. And then we have to go somewhere and sit, and then we put it in a, we're definitely taking it home pile, maybe pile,
and not this
and
time.
not this time pile. And so, and I mean, like, we spend more time doing that than we do finding the books on the shelves.
I kind of love that.
And then we make our list of the not going to get it this time book, and to put it on our next time book or gift holiday book list. And
more
so
than half the time it's the covers too.
I mean, it is. We are visual people.
Yeah.
And so, especially when you're in a bookstore, because, and I think this is very true with booksellers, you want something that's going to grab people's attention on the space. And so to move more books. And so,
to be honest, there are books that I have bought that I still have not read. I don't know if I'm ever going to read, but I love it on my shelf. This looks beautiful up here.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, listen, like, book covers mean something. I mean, like I said earlier, I pick my wine based on the label. I don't know if it's good or not. I'm going to go with how nice your label is, because that'll tell me a bit about what you value as a company, I think.
Yeah. Right. So I just feel like, hold on, honey, I just got to do this quick work thing.
Okay.
You could vamp a little, but so we do buy books because of covers. Like I said earlier, I've bought books without even reading the description or knowing anything about the author. But I also think, and I think this goes back to writers, I know that I have authors that I have bought every single thing that they have written. Like, I fall in love with them. Like, you fall in love with an artist, you fall in love with an author, and you buy everything that they write. And I have, there are several authors that I don't even necessarily love everything that they write, but I still own it because they wrote it. And so, so I think that, I don't know, my son calls it a cult following, that I have my artist cult. But
I get that.
I
think I understand.
Yeah. So, okay, Dani, I'm going to put your website in the chat when we're done, because I didn't think to pull it up beforehand so people know how to get a hold of you. But is your website that if somebody's looking for cover art or other art?
Absolutely. I mean,
just
feel free to approach me. I'm a bit backed up right now, but I will definitely schedule you. We could talk about it. Happy to discuss any commissions. Um, so yeah, feel free to ask me whatever you want. And I get, actually, surprisingly, I get a lot of university students that email me and ask for advice, and I am always
Great.
happy to share advice or answer any questions that anyone might have.
That's great. That's great. I mean, I think we're always better when we build each other up.
Oh yeah.
So
absolutely.
yeah, I think that's fantastic. Well, Dani, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm glad we were able to make Thursday work out.
Yes.
Yeah, despite my
I'm
crazy
sorry
work
I had a
schedule.
cold. It's just
All
been
right.
nonstop, but you know,
No,
we'll go with it.
Yeah, it's all fine. It's all good. So, well, thank you for joining us, and I'm glad we had this chance to talk and hopefully introduce more people to your art.
Yay!
And we'll
Thank
talk.
you.
We'll talk to you soon about the next book cover we're doing.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yes, definitely. All
All right.
right. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.